it comes to a franchise as impossibly gargantuan as Star Wars, it's only inevitable that mistakes are going to abound, and with the series fanbase being as passionate as they are, they're of course gonna love pointing them out. And while Star Wars certainly has its fair share of honest-to-God mistakes, from the iconic Stormtrooper head bump to more basic continuity errors and lore inconsistencies, what at first appears to be a mistake isn't always the case. Sometimes supposed mistakes are actually completely intentional on the part of George Lucas, other directors, and various cast and crew members working on the movies. So buckle in, folks, and get that hyperdrive calculating. I'm Ewan from What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 Star Wars movie mistakes that were totally intentional. Number 10. Jango Fett hits his head. Star Wars Episode 2: Attack of the Clones. Let's kick things off with a bit of a softball entry. In Star Wars Episode 2: Attack of the Clones, when Jango Fett flees Obi-Wan Kenobi and boards his ship Slave 1, look closely, and you can see the ship's door smack him in the head as he enters. Was this a case of Temuera Morrison simply clumsily hitting his head on an on-set prop? Of course not. It was an intentional gaffe included in the film by director George Lucas as a nod to the infamous Stormtrooper mistake from 1977 Star Wars. In the original movie, a Stormtrooper memorably hits their head when entering a control room, a mistake that George Lucas and his army of editors seemingly missed during production. The mistake took on a life of its own in the years and decades that followed, as it became widely known among even casual Star Wars fans, enough that Lucas evidently decided to pay tongue-in-cheek homage to it in Attack of the Clones. If you're still somehow not convinced the mistake was deliberate, look closely at Jango Fett during the Battle of Geonosis later in the film, and you'll see a small dent in the top of his helmet. Number 9. Luke's Force Kick. Star Wars Episode 6: Return of the Jedi. Here's a supposed mistake that a lot of Star Wars fans love to point out. When Luke Skywalker helps rescue Leia from Jabba the Hutt, he kicks one of Jabba's goons in the face, or rather doesn't. Look not so closely, and you'll see that Luke's foot doesn't connect with the blaster-wielding enemy's face. It's not even close. And while it's reasonable to assume that this is simply a case of poor fight choreography or awkward camera placement, that's actually not it at all. Storyboards for the sequence reveal that it was always meant to look like this, with Luke using what's now semi-jokingly called a force kick to knock the soldier out. The staging is inelegant, and it absolutely looks wrong, but aside from the weapon in the minion's hand being different in the final film, it was seemingly executed precisely as intended. Hilariously, even Mark Hamill himself recently tweeted about the shot, dubbing it his quote, widely celebrated, perfectly executed force kick. Number 8. Greedo lives! Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. Everybody knows that bounty hunter Greedo is killed by Han Solo early on in A New Hope, but over the years, many fans have pointed out a supposed continuity error that implies that Greedo miraculously survived. Roughly 2 minutes after his death, a character looking almost exactly like Greedo can be seen wandering around Mos Eisley, prompting conspiracy theories that his race, the Rodians, possess a secret regenerative ability. But the answer is so much more simple than that. This is just another Rodian walking around Mos Eisley. Sure, it's a tad suspect that he's wearing the exact same outfit as Greedo, but remember that when we first meet Jabba the Hutt, he's surrounded by 3 Rodians who are also wearing the same getup. Clearly, they're all just shopping at the exact same place and are too stubborn to change. Star Wars lorekeeper Pablo Hidalgo straight up confirmed it himself. Quote, "Those other Rodians aren't Greedo, but clearly Rodians aren't that creative or individualistic when it comes to wardrobe. Costume production notes indicate that there were 3 Rodians in the cantina, all dressed the same. Tales from the Mos Eisley cantina establishes that one of them was named Dooku. Furthermore, in Return of the Jedi, we see another Rodian with the same duds, only this guy's named Beedo." Number 7. Watto shouldn't be able to fly. Star Wars Episode 1: The Phantom Menace. Some have noted that junk dealer Watto from The Phantom Menace shouldn't physically be able to fly due to his relatively light-looking wings being incapable of lifting his portly body off the ground. And according to the film's animation director Rob Coleman, this was actually something that was discussed during production, but following some first-hand research, it was decided that there was in fact no mistake at all. Coleman said that, quote, "Watto proved a different challenge because of his design. He's got that huge belly. I remember some people at ILM, Industrial Light flying magic, saying because of his wing ratio, he'd never fly. I happened to be watching one of the science and nature channels, and there's a documentary on bumblebees, and a scientist said, quote, actually, the wing-to-body ratio is quite confusing, because technically, they shouldn't be able to fly. I went back in and said, the bumblebee has wings that are too small, so Watto's got wings that are too small. And by the way, his belly's filled with helium. Better yet, the common assertion that bees break the laws of physics by flying, absolute poodoo. Number 6. Parsecs as a measurement of time. Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. 1977 Star Wars introduced one of the more famously quibble-about moments in the entire franchise when Han boasted that the Millennium Falcon was, quote, the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. Except anyone who knows their parsecs knows that a parsec isn't a measurement of time but of distance, in turn ensuring that Han's claim is totally nonsensical. While it's most often suggested that George Lucas simply screwed up, or rather lazily used an obscure measurement he figured nobody would take notice of, a draft of the original Star Wars script obliterates any doubt that the American graffiti director knew precisely what he was doing. Immediately after Ford says his famous one-liner, the script follows up with, quote, Ben reacts to Solo's stupid attempt to impress them with obvious misinformation. And even in the final film itself, just look at Obi-Wan's face after Han brings up parsecs. He looks at him as if to say, that's bantha crap, mate. Number 5. The Confused Mon Calamari. Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. In Episode 6, literally a second before Admiral Akbar says his iconic "It's a trap" line, keep your eye on the Mon Calamari standing up on the left-hand side of the screen. Somewhat hilariously, they appear to be a bit confused about the location of the monitor they're supposed to be looking at. At first, they walk over to the far left side of the frame, then upon realizing their error, suddenly turn around to face the other way. While in practical terms, you can certainly argue that the actor portraying this particular Mon Calamari was either poorly directed or struggled to see what they were doing while wearing the costume, there is a persuasive enough in-universe explanation. After all, the Mon Calamari's eyes are positioned on the sides of their head, limiting their field of binocular vision and forcing them to turn their head to see objects nearby. Either that, or they just left something in the other room and had to go get it. I do that all the time. Number 4. Padme's Magic Button. Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Almost immediately following Attack of the Clones' release, a fleet of fans readily pointed out an admittedly pretty funny mistake about the movie. When Padme presses the exact same button twice on her space yacht to perform 2 separate functions, sending a message back to the Jedi on Coruscant and then showing a map on their distance from Geonosis, it doesn't really make much sense. While in this case it was absolutely a mistake, George Lucas evidently heard the criticism loud and clear, and so decided to have a little bit of fun with Perdicki fans by intentionally repeating the same mistake again in Episode 3, now with his tongue poking firmly through his cheek. When Padme begins her journey to Mustafar, she again presses the exact same button to take off, now suggesting the damn thing has 3 independent functions, ensuring it makes even less sense than before. Oh, George, you sneaky little rascal. Number 3. Bombs dropping in space. Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. The magic xylophone moment of Star Wars discourse. Remember when people complained about bombs dropping in space in The Last Jedi? The argument of these geniuses at work is that because there isn't gravity in space, they shouldn't fall to the targets below. To that, I counter with who cares, but the question was paid thought during Episode 8's production, with The Last Jedi's visual effects supervisor Ben Morris taking the time to explain why the scene makes sense in universe. Quote, we did all go, how do bombs drop in space? And we sat there for ages, and then Ryan said, they're maglev bombs. It's Star Wars. Let's not worry. Let's move on. If you imagine that all of these bombs are actually projected out of that bomber and they're traveling in space, there's no reason on Earth why they wouldn't continue on down and hit the Dreadnought. So we suddenly had the solution. And beyond that, when we see Paige fall down inside the ship, it's made abundantly clear that the ship has its own artificial gravity, and thereby reasonable to assume that the bombs are also influenced by it. Number 2. Sebulba's Disappearing Act. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. During the Phantom Menace's unforgettable pod racing sequence, it's been noted that there's a VFX mistake when Anakin is being closely pursued by his main rival Sebulba near the end of the race. During the shot where Sebulba's pod is tailing Anakin in the background, he's not visible in his pod's cockpit at all, though reappears in the next shot as if by magic. Even if you ignore the sensible-ish explanation that Sebulba simply ducked his head down underneath the dashboard for a second, visual effects supervisor John Knoll actually confirmed that this wasn't really a mistake on the movie's DVD commentary. Knowles said, quote, "I figured we could get away with it," confirming that the VFX team deliberately decided not to bother rendering Sebulba in this shot because, outside of the most attentive fan keen to pore over every last frame of the movie, it would go unnoticed by about 99.7% of viewers and save the VFX artist the hassle of rendering another character. And number 1. All that anachronistic dialogue. Every Star Wars movie. Not that this has ever really been on my radar, but there are words and turns of phrases that have jarred with a lot of Star Wars fans because of how earthly they sound. For instance, in Empire, Han says, "See you in hell," a distinctly earthbound human saying if there ever was one, and in Attack the Clones, Dex says to Obi-Wan, "That depends on how big your pocketbook is." There are countless other examples of Earthspeak creeping into the franchise in a distinct way, but Pablo Hidalgo comes to the rescue once again, revealing that this has always been an intentional stylistic choice to filter the actual verbiage of Star Wars through a translator for our viewing pleasure. In a series of tweets, he said that, quote, "Parsing word origins in Star Wars is a tangled ball not worth unraveling, and the best sanity-preserving conceit is that the whole thing's being translated for our terrestrial benefit. You can try to create rules, but in the end, vibes win out." Yes, they do, Pablo. Yes, they do. And regardless of that, Harrison Ford saying, "Then I'll see you in hell," hits way harder than having him say something like, "I'll see you in the void." It's just way cooler to say hell. And those were 10 Star Wars movie mistakes that were totally intentional. Did any of these ones surprise you? Let us know down in the comments below. Just remember, notice integrations, yeah. And give us a like if you enjoyed the video, and also subscribe so you don't miss another upload going forward. Either way, I've been Ewan, this has been What Culture Star Wars, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!